Hi, I'm Rob Vanstone. I'm here with Murray McCormick, and welcome to the latest edition of Rider Rumblings, our video podcast. Um, well, the Rough Riders went into Montreal on Saturday and pretty much played the same type of game they always play. Sometimes they win, sometimes they lose. Lately, they've been winning more often than they've been losing, while kind of playing the same type of football throughout.
Yeah.
Their record is now 7-4. They've clinched a playoff spot. And it's just an interesting phenomenon, Mur, because the same type of things that we were harping on when they were losing seem to be some of the same type of things we were harping on or even complimenting when they're winning. When they were losing, AC Leonard was playing pretty well, and they're winning. AC Leonard is playing pretty well. The offense is struggling, win or lose. There's some clock management issues and game management issues, win or lose. Is this team just by 11 games into this season, just what it's going to be? Is that what we're destined to watch for the remainder of the season?
When I was preparing for this podcast, that's what I thought. Like, what are we going to talk about that says, oh, we're going to advance this team forward, we're going to move forward? I said, nope, it's the same old stuff. Oh, hang on, I almost got sacked there. Oh, sorry. Bad joke for the 6 sacks.
What happened? Oh, sorry.
No, that was a bad attempt at humor.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought maybe there was misfortune befalling you there.
No,
you know how sympathetic I am in these situations.
Yeah, I was just trying a bad joke. Is it okay? Sorry. First joke of November, last joke of November. Anyway, I don't know how, and you talked about it today. I don't know what they do with the offensive line. It's three games left in the regular season. They are what they are. They are not a very good team. Someone mentioned they get Brendan Labatt. I don't think their issues are at guard as much as they are at the tackles. I don't know how they improve things. Brett Boyko is Brett Boyko. Andrew Lauderdale had a tough game, which I kind of thought he might play a little bit better. But they still win. They still, did they play better in the second half? I would say arguably not. Argue a little better in the second half from the offensive line. Enough to win. So maybe
they got their touchdown in the first half.
Yeah, I know. But that's the team they are. They're a team with a weak offensive line that I think Jason Maas is not trying to find ways to set up plays that kind of hide that aspect, but you still got to play the game. You still got to throw the ball and run the ball, and the offensive line isn't giving the Riders that opportunity. And somehow, some way, they've got to somehow sort it out. And if you have any suggestions, Rob, or anybody has any suggestions, that doesn't include bringing in another body, because really anybody comes in, I'm thinking it's got to be 7 to 14 days, because they keep messing around with that quarantine period. It seems to bounce around, and really, with one game left into the playoffs, are they really going to make that move? So maybe, I don't know, try to get continuity, try to get something going better with the offensive line, and then
because everything's connected. There's 3 regular season games left. Like, what can you do by the time you infuse somebody in? And if it's almost playoff time, if not playoff time, and so much is based upon cohesion and timing with an offensive line. And really, at this stage, what can they do but stick with who they've been playing with and hope that somehow it gets better? That's the only thing I look at when I look at this. When I look at the football team, that's the only thing that I think that can bring down the whole house is that offensive line. And
it's all connected.
Not an insignificant factor.
It's all connected too. Like, if the offensive line doesn't block as well, they can't have a running game. They can't have that deep passing game if they aren't stopping defensive ends from chasing Cody all over the field. So it's all one big connection, and it's falling. And can't say falling down. It's disconnected at the most important connection. Can't say that either, because we keep forgetting they're still winning. They're 7-4 and they're in the playoffs. Yeah. Some days you remember the 90s. Some days that was enough.
Yeah, I remember. I sat through 2 seasons when they went 2-14. I've seen, a couple of 3-win seasons in my lifetime. So, I mean, this is a team that's won 7 games in one season, and there's still 3 regular season games remaining. But it's sometimes it's a really laborious team to watch, because they sure do it the hard way, and it's a real puzzle. And you have to remind yourself, they've allowed 10 sacks over the past 2 games, and they've won both of them. Yes. Yeah, I listened to the postgame. I listened to the CJME postgame, Green Zone postgame show on CJME CKOM on Saturday, and people are calling for they're complaining about Jason Maas, they're complaining about Cody Fajardo. It sounded like a postgame show emanating from a defeat, And I'm not saying that to criticize Jamie Nye or Belton Johnson or our former colleague Daryl Davis. That was the tenor of the feedback from the callers, and it's just really a weird vibe this year. I remember in 1981 the Riders went they started off at 7-4 after back to back 2-14 seasons that I recalled, and it was like a celebration. 7-4, nobody could believe it. Now this team's 7-4, and it's like the difference. That team was exciting to watch. This team is just it's oral surgery sometimes watching these games. But they're 7-4, and you have to give them that. It's masterful what they're. I mean, you can almost say it's masterful to do what they've done, coaching wise, to coach around a glaring deficiency such as an offensive line.
What a game by the defense though. Let's give them some credit. Like 5 sacks, so that maybe in the world of math counteracts the 6 sacks a little bit. They chased Matt Schultz out of the game. And I remember reading before that game, there was no way they were ever going to, Corey Jones says, there's no way they're ever going to do that to him. Trevor Harris wasn't ready, but then out trots Trevor Harris. And Trevor Harris looked pretty mediocre too, but the defense made him look. But, we kind of think about AC Leonard had an incredible game, 8 defensive tackles. He plays linebacker. He plays defensive end. He gets sacks. He chases quarterbacks. He was
the best player on the field, and it wasn't even close.
Not even close. And this is a guy who's missed 3 games, and we're not going to be able to forget that. But boy, since he's come back, he's just been dominant. He's just been the best, best player arguably in all 4 games, and he was named a CFL Top Performer of the Week today, and rightfully so. And it's funny because when I was reading, I was going, well, why would they pick a rider from a losing game? Because I had that same thought.
It really had that vibe.
Oh yeah, they won. AC Leonard was a stud. And Jonathan Woodard
just the sacks. You mentioned Woodard. You mentioned AC Leonard. It wasn't just the sacks though. You look at the tackles for losses. Anthony Lanier had 2. AC Leonard had 2. They trapped the Alouettes behind the line of scrimmage so many times, or held them to no gain, such as that quarterback sack or the failed quarterback sneak, where AC Leonard just burrowed his way under the offensive line, grabbed Matt Schultz's foot, and then Charbel DeBeer came in and finished him off. So. I mean, they were there was a second and 1, and AC Leonard stopped stand back in his tracks twice.
Yeah,
that was engineering a punt on one occasion and a turnover on downs the next time. It set up a 3rd and 2, and then the Riders Montreal couldn't convert. AC Leonard was just all over the place. Anthony Lanier, Micah Johnson chewing up double coverage. Charbel DeBeer. Being very conspicuous, McCann Henry being conspicuous, Pete Robertson with 2 sacks. You just keep going on and on about their defensive linemen.
Lucius Purefoy. Lucius
Purefoy changes the game with an interception.
Absolutely, that was a play of the game. I think that was a play of the game. I know there are others and stuff, and you can, but that because the offense was just sort of grinding it out, not very exciting, not doing very much, not very emotional.
First down to that point.
Yeah, and then Lucius Purefoy gets that pick. And boom, they go down and they score. And it was just like, wow, what a great play. Lucius Purefoy, we were thinking of defensive players of the year, and I remember naming he would be the guy, and I think he still is. But AC Leonard sure is making a bid for
him a run. AC Leonard's going to be amazing. I mean, and he took a lot of heat over, of course, that post-game incident after the Labor Day game.
Yeah.
And became a bit of a punchline, and hey, I had my fun with that one, but and a lot of others did. But when he's been in the lineup, the impact that he has made, just an absolutely sensational player throughout the 8 games that he's been available. You notice him every time, every game. He always does something. He's so athletic. So versatile, like you mentioned, and just the manner in which he impacted the game on Saturday was just amazing. You have to give him his due because he took a lot of heat and he took responsibility and he stepped up and he did the Zoom call and he was very contrite and he owned it. And since then he's come back and played even better than he had been before missing those 3 games. And that's saying something. He was a very impactful player before that, but it seems to have somehow made him even better, which is tough to imagine because he was really playing well before he ended up missing those 3 games.
And we never mentioned them missing Charleston Hughes this year. Barely a word on that. We thought that'd be kind of impactful. Mind you, he was a little older than other but he hasn't done very much with Toronto lately. But, the Charleston Hughes is an afterthought. The Riders have moved on very well along the defensive line with the guys they have. So that's kind of thing. And I think Leonard would have still been in it. Let's say in a perfect world, if it had been Hughes, Freddie Bishop III, and Leonard back in the day, if that had worked out, I think Leonard still would have had an incredible thing. And good for him, as I said, Rob, you mentioned that to come back from what he did, and he caused it on himself. It's all on Leonard. All that stuff that happened was on Leonard. And to still stand up and play better, that I think does make him an opportunity to be the defensive player of the year. Let's quickly touch on Vedvik, the Corey, as we learned how you pronounce his name, because I pronounced it Care last week. Corey, you had the number of his hang times. He wasn't bad, was he?
Average hang time was 3.90 seconds. I inserted that into your story. I didn't tell you, but I did.
That one where I read
it. Of his 8 punts, 3 of them had hang times exceeding 4 seconds. In a couple of cases, he was flirting with 4.4. Those are John Ryan type peak hang times. John's usually in the low 4s with hang times, with average hang time, and Vedvik in his debut was 3.9. So that's very credible. That could have been a huge loss for the Riders, and still may prove to be. But to be able to fill that position with a global player and actually have a useful place way to use the global, instead of it just being a token mannequin on the sidelines waiting for pigeons to land on your shoulders, you've actually got a global player who can go in there and contribute. That's the way it should be.
That's right, and good for him, and maybe this. You and I have both been very critical of this global plan of not producing anything other than guys standing on the sidelines. So maybe it took a little bit of patience to get a guy in there who can do something. And if he keeps
that's the only position where he really can.
Yeah, he might.
He might be a long-term. There's a lot of soccer in those countries.
Yeah, he might be a long-term solution. Like John Ryan's not any younger. He's got a really severely sprained ankle, which I've heard high sprain. I heard Craig Dickinson mentioned a possible break in there, broken bones. So maybe this was a lot John's last season. I'm not saying we know that by any stretch of the imagination, but he's going to be gone for the season. And maybe Corey, I don't know how you get Corey out of that first name, but anyway.
A-A-R-E is Corey. Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, but good for him. And he was a great guy. He just wanted to talk the other day. Just, he's finally getting even these elite athletes. Sometimes you forget they work out by themselves so much. But when they get a chance to be in the crowd, they kind of like to talk a little bit. So he was pretty cool about that. They got a playoff spot, Rob. Now we have coming up ahead of us the awesome, uninspired, uninteresting, other than off-field controversy, Edmonton Elks. Back-to-back games. I would assume if they win those two, they got a home playoff game, and maybe even one. The CFL just mentioned today that there's the Riders can't do anything to the playoff position other than help get a better idea of playoff positioning. But can this be a trap game? And I hate that trap game words, but I'm trying to remember, and I looked it up one year, the Riders were cruising along, and they went to played another bad Edmonton team and got their butts kicked. I wonder, is this Edmonton team capable of kicking anybody's butt?
If they're contortionists, perhaps they should kick their own. The Craig Dickinson, Jeremy O'Day regime with Cody Fajardo a quarterback has done a great job of ensuring that trap games don't become losses. They've flirted with defeat every now and then, but since July of 2019, since they lost that game in Ottawa, Cody Fajardo's first start, since then the only teams they have lost to are Calgary and Winnipeg. Other than that, they're 18-0. So they haven't lost to anybody but Calgary or Winnipeg since very early in the 2019 season.
I don't doubt you, but that sounds like an interesting.
So that means they've been rolling. And Calgary was great in 2019. They've surged a bit this year thanks to the Rough Riders. They were 2-5 when the Riders started playing them. The Riders turned them into a 4-5 team and then beat them. But Calgary's still Calgary, and Winnipeg has won the Grey Cup last year and is a favorite to win the Grey Cup this year. So that tells me that when they play a team that they should step on, the exception being that 2-5 Calgary team, but again, that's Calgary. When they play a team they should step on, they squash the bug. Sorry to bug lovers everywhere, but that happens to bugs every now and then. So that gives you, I think, some reassurance if you're looking at it from a Rough Rider perspective that they should be able to go into Edmonton and win, and then certainly defenestrate them on November 13th at Mosaic Stadium.
Do they have to romp? Do they need a butt kicking? Do they have to go in there and say, hit 50 points against Edmonton to get people to say, yeah, this is, or just a win is a win is a win?
Might not get 50 points in 2 games against Edmonton, the way this offense is going. But they just got to win. You know, they've it isn't always pretty, and I think this far it almost reprises what we talked about earlier in the podcast. This team isn't going to butt kick anybody, but they're going to find a way to win. They're going to grind it out. You know, a win on the road is never an especially easy thing. So I would expect them to win on Friday night. I wouldn't expect 400 yards passing. I wouldn't expect 50 points. I might expect AC Leonard to be all over the place again.
Yeah.
And you know, if you can do it against a team such as Montreal, like a team such as Calgary, I think you can certainly go into Edmonton and do it. That team seems to be in utter disarray, and that's also a very, very banged up Edmonton team, and a team that really doesn't seem to care. You know, Terry Jones has already, you know, taken that whole organization task. It just seems like you just need to flush everything there and start over again. And so, I mean, this is as winnable as a game gets in professional sports.
And you can tell the apathy. I think so. And there's also the apathetic attitudes extended to the fans, because they said 22,000 there, and I've seen quotes between 8,000 and 10,000. And whoever thought that Edmonton would have 8,000 to 10,000 people for a football game at Commonwealth Stadium in our lifetime. Yeah, it is Argo-esque, and the Argo-esque one wasn't much better. It looked like about 9,000, and we've gone on and on about Toronto. Boy, when it's starting to storm into places like Edmonton and Calgary now with these attendance issues. Even Montreal didn't look particularly well attended, but it was pouring rain, and maybe there was rain expected.
That's just professional sport these days. Look at NHL teams that ordinarily could count on sellouts, and they're no longer getting them. You know, teams that never had empty seats are now advertising that tickets are available. So if that's happening at the NHL level, you know, I think the repercussions and the reverberation is certainly going to be felt at the CFL level. We're talking a different price point per ticket, but we're also talking about a different prestige level. And the CFL has always had attendance issues. Some of these Canadian-based NHL teams they're not used to seeing any empty seats, or at least unsold seats. In Toronto, they just go sit in the lounge after they pay for their third row seats. But
so they do, because I was there 2 weeks ago. Yeah.
But the buffer that the NHL and other leagues that are facing attendance issues is they've got these massive TV contracts and the type of foundations that allowed them to play through a pandemic, which the CFL couldn't do, being as gate driven as it is. And now that they're back having games and they're as dependent on the gate as before, and hoping to recoup some of the losses that were incurred in 2020, and then attendances, including here, aren't what they were hoping for or banking on. Again, it's really concerning. The CFL is in a very precarious situation when you look at the attendances. The NHL teams, they'll withstand it. CFL, what if it gets worse? When you're seeing teams, supposed heartland of the Canadian Football League, such as Edmonton, facing these issues, how many people will be there? Well, actually, with the Riders coming in, they'll probably get a pretty decent crowd, because
it's a Friday
Rider fans will add a few thousand to the gate, I would think.
It's a Friday night game, though, and I wonder if, I know the way it's people still have jobs, and so making the 8-hour run to Edmonton by car or whatever, I don't know, is attractive.
Saskatchewan expatriates living in Alberta, those usually fill up quite a few seats.
Seem to be as crazy as they are in Calgary as compared to Edmonton, at least based on my. Yeah. But you kind of hope there'll be a big crowd. But speaking of losses, and I know we don't like to do this because we haven't been to practice yet, but swerving, Kyran Moore went down with what looked like an apparent knee injury, and he showed up on sideline on crutches. There's their leading receiver. Fortunately, they have Shaq Evans and Duke Williams, but I think we underestimate a lot of the things that Kyran Moore does for that team, including his energy and his enthusiasm and his leadership on the field. I don't know.
Their best receiver in space. He's their most elusive receiver. He's their fastest receiver. But he's not a number one receiver. But with Duke Williams and Shaq Evans here, he was perfectly suited for a number 3 role.
Yeah.
And he played the number, well, him and Naaman Roosevelt were sort of the next option after Shaq Evans in 2019. And so he can be a 1A type of receiver. And to lose somebody who gives them a dimension that none of their other receivers have is certainly costly. It wasn't an accident in the Riders' first game with Duke Williams and Shaq Evans in the offense together. It was Kyran Moore who led the Riders in receptions and receiving yards and scored a touchdown. Because suddenly he's not getting the best defensive back the other team has. And you can put him in one-on-one matchups, and that's how he scored that touchdown. And he's the kind of player you can just have fun with the joystick if you're Jason Moss. And that's a huge loss for the Rough Riders.
And who replaces him? Like I was looking through do we move KSB or Keon Schaefer-Baker from that backup wide receiver to slot? Do you go with Rashard Davis?
Ricardo there again?
Yeah,
Ricardo there again. Paul McRoberts.
Then it gets
forgotten. Paul McRoberts.
And Justin McInnes, might be an option, but he's injured, so it can't. Jake Hardy isn't really a guy that can step in there and replace him as a Canadian. So they're going to have some work to replace him now.
I would think they'd fill that spot with an American. So it comes down to Ricardo.
And we're just covering our, but we may get there and Kyran Moore will be running around practice today. But you and I both know we saw what happened on Saturday, and it'd be pretty.
Sound very optimistic after the game in
Montreal. Very optimistic. He may be gone for a while, which is unfortunate.
He's such a nice young man too.
Yeah, and their injury list is so they're pretty banged up from top to bottom too. If you look at their long injury, I meant to add up the numbers today, but then I got busy reading one of your stories. But they've got a pretty impressive. Can you have an impressive list of injuries? They have a pretty long
list of impressive players on an injury list.
Yeah, there you go. That's good. That's why you make a living talking about words, eh? Writing good. So anyway, they've got to somehow keep fighting through all these injuries, and they don't. They made it. Shaq Evans comes back, so they are lucky. As I said, Shaq Evans and Duke Williams being back gives them 2 all-star receivers that can maybe step up for Kyran. But as you said, he was that third option that was just so good and gave Corey another chance, and could be well missed. Cody, sorry, God. Sorry about that.
No, but I mean, you can just do things with him that you can't do with any of the other receivers. He's their most elusive. He's their receiver. He's their fastest receiver. You just get him in space and you can have fun. And I thought as much as Duke Williams and Shaq Evans were going to revitalize the Rider passing game, it was also going to present options for using Kyran Moore that hadn't previously been there, because he was the one guy that I think that the opposing defensive coordinators had to worry about shutting down. And before Williams and Evans entered, and we haven't seen the big numbers out of either of them yet. Duke Williams had all his receptions in game 1 in the first half. He had all his receptions in game 2 in the second half. So he went more than a full game without a catch. And his most notable plays have been on special teams with the 2 onside kick recoveries. As far as Shaq Evans, you just keep waiting for that explosion. They tried one pass to him in the end zone in Calgary, didn't work. They tried another one in the corner, didn't work. Duke Williams was open on. Here's Candy.
Oh, looks like Candy. Is that Candy's
just
back?
Got in for her walk, and
no cone. She's no longer
Duke
a cone.
Williams was no cone. Duke Williams was open in the end zone on the incompletion to Shaq Evans, and they just waited on that one a little bit more. Hi, Candy. She just got in for her walk. She's thrilled. Are you a good girl? And Murr, you're gonna have to carry this one for a sec. They had Shaq Evans open down the sideline for what should have been a 33-yard major in Calgary, and Almondo Sewell, as he's been known to do, kind of created a push, and Cody had to throw off his back foot, and the pass was errant. That should have been just a gimme touchdown there, and they just can't get Shaq Evans on track. But Edmonton might be a remedy for a lot of things.
There might be a lot of good things coming out of it. Maybe we'll see something out of the return game. Wouldn't that be funny? A nice change too, like.
I can't imagine that happening. We talked earlier about they are what they are. That's what they are. Their return game isn't going to really be that. Just don't fumble the punt. Don't fumble the kickoff. Right, Candy? Yeah. Isn't she a cute dog? She's in the Humane Society calendar, by the way. She's Miss April. So for $10, you can get a nice picture of Candy, and she'll be pleased to autograph it for you.
Okay, that'd be good. She'll give you a pause print on that. Yeah. She looks better now. She's all groomed too.
Yeah, she just got groomed positively perfect a week and a half ago. She's
not on the lips, Rob. Not on the lips.
Ew. She's so cute. Sorry.
But anyway, back to the return. Maybe we spent enough time on the.
My wife took her for a walk, and then she always comes running upstairs to say that she's back. And I had a feeling she would make her presence felt during the podcast. So sorry.
Well, maybe that's about enough time spent on the return game because we really have no other options. Jamal Murrow can come back and maybe make a difference somehow.
The special teams has been pretty good this year. Brett Lothar has been terrific. He went through a spell where he was missing some kicks. But when Brett Lothar, and this goes back to 2018, when Brett Lothar's had to make a kick, when it's been a really important kick, he's made it. I can't think of an exception. He's so reliable. John Ryan was John Ryan. Kari Vedvik had a nice debut. Their coverage teams have been very sound this year. Mm-hmm. The only area in special teams that's really been troublesome has been the return game. But at least they haven't been fumbling the ball in the return game. At least they haven't been turning it over. But that's the best that can be said about the return game is that it just hasn't been a liability. It just hasn't been it's just been neutral.
Yeah, nothing, no field position gain, no field position really lost. And,
you just, when the riders fail to punt, you just think, okay, don't get called for holding. Don't get called for a legal block. Just don't take it back at all.
Craig
the penalties are still a bit of an issue with this football team, but.
You wait for after every big play to see where the flag is going to fall. Don't you find that way?
And that's Canadian football. As long as I've been watching it, it's been that way on special teams.
Yeah.
I mean, how many touchdowns did Gizmo Williams have called back due to penalty?
I remember someone tried to go through and figure that out, and they couldn't because they didn't keep track of them that way back in the day.
But it was double digit. I mean, it was a pretty healthy. If you add the number of times he crossed the goal line on kick returns, I mean, it's even more astronomical than his stats already are. So what haven't we explored so far? Let's talk about Cody Fajardo a bit.
And just before we leave, I want to just make one point. Gizmo Williams was famous for his backflips. AC Leonard did a backflip after that.
Remember Hugh Charles used to do the backflips too here.
Yeah, and they were only like under 5 feet. This guy's AC Leonard's a little taller than that. So
that's a pretty athletic move.
The question is, it's an athletic move. Yes, it's a celebration. Do you want your all-star defensive end doing backflips? Well, I guess you don't do them unless you can do them. But anyway, that's just a little point. I know I could never do one. I'm lucky if I can roll over on my side these days. Anyway, Cody Fajardo. I don't think all-stars in his season this year. Do you, Rob?
Let's look around the West. I mean, that's easy. Zach Collaros is the West.
Zach's got the
all-star
and Zach deservedly so.
I would nominate him for most outstanding player.
Yeah,
Zach Collaros has been terrific. Cody Fajardo. Again, it's a different dynamic than it was in 2019. Different offensive coordinator, different scheme, higher expectations than there were 2 years ago. I think we've seen more emotion and more frustration than we did from Cody that first year, which was a joyride. Even though the way it ended with the oblique injury and the bitter loss to Winnipeg, it was still a charmed year for Cody Fajardo. This year the bar is raised expectation-wise, but I don't think what's around Cody Fajardo is what it was. You look at that offensive line in 2019, even though they had to deal with the absence of Brendan Labatt for a considerable portion of that season, they had the depth to overcome that. And their tackles were Thaddeus Coleman always did a good job. Taron Vaughn was tremendous, and he hurt his shoulder early in training camp this year. And as much as people talk about Brendan Labatt, etc., that Taron Vaughn injury created that domino effect, and that is still being felt. Dakota Shepley was part of the equation. Even you look at Braden Schramm. I will say this about the offensive line. I got to say something nice about them. The first pass to Kyran Moore that was dropped, Cody Fajardo had a perfect pocket.
Yes.
The incompletion to Shaq Evans in the end zone, Cody Fajardo had a nice pocket on that play. On the William Powell touchdown, the right side of the offensive line caved in the left side of the Montreal defensive line. Josiah St. John, who was in the game for extra reinforcements, just bulldozed somebody. And I replayed it, trying to figure out who it was on the Montreal side and couldn't. But Josiah St. John bulldozed somebody. The initial block, Montreal was blitzing, kind of had a run blitz going on, it looked like. And Alex Dupuis, great story on him and Megan Benfido, by the way, in last Saturday's paper. Dupuis didn't get a piece of the blitzer, or enough of the blitzer. So he comes in. William Powell's got to improvise, gets away from the blitzer, spins, and then goes to his right. And that's where you suddenly see that Josiah St. John was very impactful on that side. Brett Boyko did a nice job. Logan Ferland did a nice job. They just took care of Montreal and steamrolled them to the left, and William Powell went to the right for the Riders' only touchdown of the game. So let's give the offensive line some love there. What are you doing, Can?
Yeah,
she's got a bone hidden underneath the bed sheets, and she's rather determined to find it.
These are so many ways you could go with that joke. There's so many ways we could go with that joke. I'm not even going to try. Excuse me. But that goes back to where we kind of started this. That goes back to where we started this. But this is who they are. They are like the offensive line can do those things that you just mentioned there. That can happen, good things, and then we all talk about the bad things that happen. So I know they have a good way of insulating themselves from the noise outside the stadium. One thing good football teams are, and we've seen that, they say they don't listen to all the criticism, but it's pretty hard to go.
But as soon as you criticize them, they're very quick to hear back from them.
Yeah, they don't. So and justifiably so. So maybe, they got these 3 games, like as we said, 2 games against Edmonton should win them. Hamilton likely won't have anything to play for in that final regular season.
And the Riders might not either.
Not either. So it could be way back. I'm trying to remember which season that happened. Was that 18 when they played their last game? Yeah, 19 they had a win. 18 they didn't have anything to gain from the last game, other than they just played it.
That will happen from time to time, but they still won't give the fans a discount in those situations.
No.
But you know what it reminds me of, this offense, without the offensive line issues, mind you. So maybe it's a different comparison. Riders in 2013 had this high-powered offense and won a Grey Cup with it. They had a great receiving core, an amazing running back, etc. And Darian Durant threw 31 touchdown passes and was named a West All-Star. Should have been named a CFL All-Star. It was Darian's best season. In 2014, they started off 8-2. Great start, but the offense wasn't the same. They were still winning, and they were winning ugly sometimes, but suddenly Darian's touchdown pass totals were virtually halved, and before he got hurt. The difference being Weston Dressler went to the NFL. And then when he came back, it was he had a game and a half of playing with Darian before Darian got hurt, and they just took a little while to get their rapport back. So it almost seems the same. You take away the best receiver for considerable portions of the season. The team still finds a way to win. It's pretty resourceful, but the numbers are down. And then Weston Dressler comes back, as did Shaq Evans, and then you add in Duke Williams. It didn't have the anticipated rejuvenative effect right off the bat. And then by the time Weston Dressler did get settled in the offense again, he was catching passes from Tino Sinceri. So that's what can happen, from year to year. I mean, it was, in that case, there wasn't the gap year of 2020 in the equation, but 2013 and 2014, Darian Durant was pretty much the same human being, same quarterback. He just didn't have the same resources around him. They didn't have Corey Sheets anymore. Didn't have Weston Dressler for most of the season, and the numbers went down, but they still found a way to win on the strength of defense and I think character. And that's what this team is, I think, doing now. In a way, it's a bit of a throwback to what the Rough Riders did in 2014, or even look at it. 2018, the Rough Riders went 12-6, got a home playoff game, and there were some really ugly football games. I mean, Zach Caleros threw 9 touchdown passes, 13 interceptions. That offense was just horrible to watch. And so you don't look at that 2018 team and think of really glowingly of it, but that was a 12-6 football team that just kept finding a way on the strength of defense. And I think Jason Shivers and his schemes are doing what Chris Jones and his schemes did for the Rough Riders a few years back.
Yeah, I am. Shivers has a great couple of games defensively. I think, especially the game against Montreal, just called everything. They didn't blitz a lot, did they? I don't think there was a lot of blitzing.
I mean, they a little bit more than usual, but of their 5 sacks, 3 of them were the 4-man rush, and 2 of them were the 5-man rush. I don't recall them going with 6. Maybe they did once or twice, but I don't recall it. Montreal on its blitzes or on its sacks, it was pretty much they were sending 5 or 6 every time they got a sack. But the Rough Riders did it 3 times with 4 pass rushers. We look how effective Calgary was against the Rough Riders in those back-to-back victories over Saskatchewan when they were almost exclusively sending 4 people and getting pressure. So the Riders were able to do to Montreal what Calgary did to Saskatchewan. You rush 4 people, you create all sorts of havoc, and you can put everybody else back into coverage. Except suddenly you're not facing Bo Levi Mitchell, you're facing Matthew Schultz. That's advantageous for the Rough Riders.
And who do you think they're going to face against Edmonton? Is it Nick Arbuckle? Is it Cornelius? Who knows?
Yeah, I don't know. Does it matter?
Not much.
You know,
I don't think
that team just looks like it's just wants to get the season over with. What's going to happen when Edmonton plays those 3 rapid fire games at the end of the year that mean nothing?
Aren't they there? Doesn't that start with this game on Friday?
I guess it would, because it's Riders. And, no, hold on, because there's a week between those. There's 8 days between the two Riders games in Edmonton, so it's down the. You kick the can down the road a little bit, but it's just it's that could be ugly. You know, if the Eskimos are competitive early, they might be able to ride that, but if they get down, if the Rough Riders can get a good start,
they're not out of the
Edmonton,
playoffs yet.
That they're at the Edmonton Elks, then it could fall apart. And I think that's the only danger the Riders face. They're such consistently slow starters that if they can't get going until the second quarter and they give the Eskimos a bit of life, a bit of hope, maybe the Elks can ride that and make a game of it. But if the Rough Riders can atypically hit Edmonton with some shock and awe right out of the gate, that team could just fold up like a cheap tent.
And they're not. Isn't it great in the CFL that with 2 wins, the Eskimos still see, you did it to me.
We're tied at 1-1 with that guy.
Yes. The Elks still have kind of a playoff spot in their sights. It takes a whole lot of permutations for them to get it, but just 2 wins and it's still not. They still aren't out of it technically. But
this is the CFL. You know, in 1981, Montreal made the playoffs with 3 wins.
Yeah,
Ottawa got to the Grey Cup with 5. So you never know.
Anyway,
but it won't happen.
But we do know we got to wrap her up, Rob, because
you got to get to practice. I have a day off today. I want to go for a bike ride because it's just balmy out.
There were snowflakes yesterday morning. I noticed when I was up. So
yeah, it is November in Saskatchewan, isn't it? Yeah. I just got to read our little outro, they call it in the industry. If you enjoy the podcast, we hope you do. If you've lasted this far into the podcast, we're pretty sure that you do. So thank you for bearing with us. And I hope you enjoyed the dog. If you enjoy the podcast, please leave a review and a 5-star rating, 6-star rating for Candy, if you would, who I mentioned is in the Humane Society calendar. She's Miss April. It helps us grow the podcast. You can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to send us a question, please do. My email is rvanstone@postmedia.com, and we will be happy to read it on the show. You can also follow me, my name's Rob, on Twitter at @RobVanstone or Murray, and his Twitter handle is @MurrayLP. So there we go. I'm going to let you get to practice. I may ride my bike close to Mosaic Stadium today. Thank you so much for being with us. We will do this again as we always do next Tuesday and talk about game 1 of the 2-game set against the Edmonton Elks. For Murray McCormick, I'm Rob Vanstone. That's Candy. And we will do this again next week. Take care, stay safe, and have a great day.